Good afternoon. My name is James Cromar. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Mobility Initiatives at the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as the Broward MPO. And I work with the team that pulled together the event today. Before we introduce our speakers, I want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. If we could go on to the next slide. There's the mute and unmute that you can use the button on the bottom left of your toolbar to mute yourself. I guess the main thing that we want to emphasize here is that if you want to bring up any questions, we have a chat feature down at the bottom of the screen where you can type in any questions. And we will be planning to respond to the questions at the end of the presentation. So please be patient, but that gives you a little time to think of some good answers too. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. I want to do a little introduction though before we get into our presenters today. One of the reasons I'm a city planner is that I had experience with what I thought were kind of naturally occurring open streets in my childhood. I remember as a kid walking down the street with my parents because there were no cars around, or another time we came out of a busy movie theater and there were so many people on the street that the cars had to wait their turn to go anywhere. Or another place where there was a city full of, with a street full of bars and nightclubs, and there were barricades set up to keep the cars out during the weekend. And not until maybe, years later now is where I got to think, well, those weren't necessarily naturally occurring events. Those were events that it took somebody to plan, somebody had to do something to make those happen. And so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about open streets, or they're also known as ciclovias, that they offer communities the opportunity to experience streets in whole new ways. They provide new public spaces, connect neighborhoods and cities, encourage physical activity. People can explore community assets such as parks, museums, plazas, local businesses, and other things. And so the Broward MPO's goal today with this presentation is to introduce and engage local governments and our partners in the implementation of open streets. You will learn today from wildly successful programs in Los Angeles, the Ciclovia program, and also Minneapolis's thriving Open Streets MPLS. And this webinar will also support further steps toward implementing a Ciclovia or open street event here in Broward. So we want to thank our speakers today. We have Tafarai Bain, who's the Ciclovia Chief Strategist, and then also Nick Ray Olson, the Public Events Director, formerly the Event and Program Manager at Our Streets Minneapolis. So let me hand it over to Tafarai.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tafarai Bain. I'm Chief Strategist at Ciclovia. Thanks a lot, James, for introducing me.
I'm sorry for saying your name wrong, Tafarai.
No worries. I was like, is he talking to me? It's all good. Really happy to be here, everyone, and to talk about the topic of open streets. My name is Tafarai Bain again. I came to Ciclovia as a participant. I attended the first event Ciclovia ever did as a regular citizen. At the time I was working at a nonprofit organization. Oh, sorry, I'm starting to talk, but I didn't start sharing my slideshow. So let me start sharing my slideshow. Boom. Present. Great. So again, Tafarai Bain, Chief Strategist at Ciclovia. I've been with the organization for 10 years now. I attended the first event as a participant. At the time, I was working on issues around community development and affordable housing in my day job as a community organizer at a nonprofit organization, but very much had an eye to issues of mobility and transportation and street safety in particular. I saw an ad for this event, Ciclovia, in our local newspaper, the LA Weekly. And was really, it looked magical. The idea of our city, Los Angeles, if you've ever been there, you might understand it being very much a car city. From some folks talk about like a car capital of the world in some levels. Freeways, traffic, those are the kinds of words you think about when you think about Los Angeles. But I saw this picture in our local paper that showed all these smiling people riding bicycles in the street. And I was an avid cyclist at the time. I rode mostly for commuting to work and sometimes for recreation, but I don't wear spandex ever. I loved riding my bicycle, grew up riding my bike in LA, but I always felt kind of terrified and scared to ride it in the street. Even though I took to it, I felt like I was kind of put on my superhero cape and having to take a risk to go out to ride my bike. I saw this event and thought, wow, it seems like a really great opportunity. And I attended it, and I drank the Kool-Aid immediately. The idea of seeing so many Angelenos connecting in the streets felt really magical. and felt like an amazing opportunity. And so I hounded the organization, became a volunteer, and asked to join their became a part of the board of directors. And now I'm a full-time staff person. I also serve as a city commissioner here in Los Angeles with the Rec and Parks, and help oversee our park system here in Los Angeles. And so from that perspective of recreational space, but also from mobility and transportation, open streets is an amazing strategy to tackle some key urban issues. So 10 years later, we've had 37 events. We've closed over 235 miles of car-free streets. We've had over 1.9 million participants. That's roughly 50,000 people per event. Some of our events are as big as 100,000 folks, 150,000. Some of our smaller ones can be around 30,000. 10 plus forms of people-powered transportation. We frame the events as being not just for bicycles, even though obviously, even from this picture, you can see bicycles tends to be the dominant transportation mode there. But we invite skateboarders, we invite skaters, roller skaters, we invite pedestrians. We really try to think about it as building a park space for a day, and that people-powered transportation can find its home there, as well as just people being active and healthy in public space. More people, 5 times more people use these temporary park spaces we built on our event days than all other LA parks combined on the same day. And so the idea of taking and building and making a park in a neighborhood for a day takes on real meaning, and particularly in neighborhoods that might be kind of park poor, or neighborhoods that have little recreational space, or programming or public programming opportunities. Your team from Broward came and visited us for our last event. And this here is the route that they got to see. Our Heart of LA route, really sort of encapsulating our downtown Los Angeles area, downtown area of the city, one of the oldest regions of our city. These are how these events work. You see the blue line. The blue line is where there's no cars allowed. So on the days of the event, we close those down to car traffic. And then the yellow lines where that cross over the route, that's where cars can still cross the route. It's very important to us that this is something that doesn't disrupt a community like a marathon, or a parade where the whole region is snarled and folks can't get and function in normal ways, go to normal businesses, go to their church, get out of their homes. And so we make these crossing points to ensure that residents have ways to traverse the event, and business can continue in the neighborhood as normal as possible, while still repurposing some of the space for a different use. Trying to take more of my notes. Each of these green points are hubs that we activate with key programming. Also, there's this place where our sponsors can come in and sort of have activation. I'll talk about the sponsors a little bit later. But those hubs are also where you can get your bike repaired, where you can get some water, restrooms, food stop. There's essentially pit stops, but they also allow us to sort of organize around community narratives, and lift up stories and culture in communities. You see the Mariachi Plaza Hub, because that's in Mariachi Plaza, one of our home to a lot of our mariachi culture here in Los Angeles. Our Chinatown Hub, name just speaks for itself, but obviously our local Chinatown here in Los Angeles. The Civic Center Hub, that's where our City Hall is. MacArthur Park Hub, another, looked to as, or coined the Statue of Liberty of the West in some ways, home to a lot of our immigrant populations, and where folks often come as their first stop when they move to our city. And so lifting up and creating these spaces of programming and culture allow for some of the narratives and stories of our communities to also be shared, which is a really critical part of these events to us, the opportunity to really platform and lift up community story, community narrative, culture, and people. Again, emphasis on people, how we're uplifting people in these communities with these events, by providing space for natural cultural programming to manifest, and the event helping to bring and catalyze those spaces with people and eyeballs and attention, and tourism, and foot traffic. And it looks like this. This is what, an event day can look like. This is actually MacArthur Park here up in the top corner, the green space, right across from, there's a high school over here on the left-hand side. You see the high school marching band in the middle of the street there. But you also see one of our sponsors, Target, there with some of their booths in the park. And you see some food trucks up in the top part. I think this cursor works where you see it. You see these food trucks up here. This is a Ciclovia day. This is a few years ago, I think, prior to the pandemic. And this, there's a lot of things happen here. These are people connecting. These are people meeting and seeing new parts of the city they may never visited. This is residents of this neighborhood having an opportunity to play outside their door and connect to spaces. This is one of the most dangerous streets in Los Angeles, Wilshire Boulevard, part of our high injury network, where we get the most. We have a network of streets in our city that we documented that we get the most fatalities and collisions. And it's predominantly in communities of color, it's predominantly in low-income neighborhoods. It's predominantly in some of our densest parts of our city, where people just die from being on the street. And so, this is an opportunity to bring life as opposed to these spaces being filled with a little bit too much death. So this is the origin story. I'm gonna go back to 10 years ago when I attended that first event. That's me on the right-hand side. This is the mayor of Los Angeles on the left-hand side, Eric Garcetti, our current mayor. Next to him and in between is Lita Reynolds, our DOT chief here, general manager here of our Department of Transportation. And this is, sorry, I always get his first name wrong, Gil Penalosa, one of the founders of Ciclovia from Bogota, Colombia. So we were inspired to do this event by the experience of folks in Bogota, Colombia, who have been doing these events for decades. These events in their part of the woods, checking my time. These events in their part of the woods have been going on for 80 miles of streets every Sunday. And so that experience of success in their community really inspired us to adopt this here. And we actually had the opportunity to invite some of their leaders and one of the founders to come out and visit us and check out our project here. This is a public-private partnership. We work really closely with the city of Los Angeles and other city jurisdictions here to make these events happen. And they're an all hands on deck, all city departments kind of project, where in some cases, there was some levels where new systems were made so the city departments could function a little bit better to implement an event like this, because it really was a little bit new having an event that crossed over many council districts, jurisdictions, and created collaborations where sometimes there's a little bit of political distinction or difference, or even departmental, function-wise, a little bit of difference. And so these events also have created a more collaborative city in a lot of ways, and continue to be a space for collaboration in lots of different ways in event programming and in just the event implementation in general. And one of the initial things that these initial city partners did was identify the resources to implement these events. Some of our initial money to launch this project came from sources that were centered around programs that wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California and the city of Los Angeles. And so, that was a really successful initial place to find resources in order to help get these events off the ground. At this point, a lot of our resources still come from similar pools, but also our local regional metro transportation planning organization, LA Metro, Metro LA. They put aside a whole fund now for open streets programs that helps to fund these programs across the region. So essentially, over time, we've started to build out resources within our public side of our government to produce resources for these specific kind of engagements, open street events. So our event partners run the gamut from LA Metro, City of Los Angeles, AARP, SoCal Gas, and you can see the list. They're from foundations to public entities to big, AARP, big national foundations, to smaller groups like Los Photos Project, a group here in Los Angeles that trains community youth to take photos and to be photographers. Our events come together with all these diverse partners because they essentially see that the event space is filled with Angelenos, all the Angelenos they want to try to touch and get connected with. 35% of, you can see the numbers, 35% of our participants are first timers every event, so we always have this influx of new people attending these events. At the same time, I said at the same time, many our participants come from 75 of the zip codes from all over the region. So it's very diverse in terms of it's a pool from all over our region. But then 36%, over 30% of these folks are participating in more than 1 to 3 events ever. So a lot of return visitors as well. It becomes a cultural thing, a lifestyle thing. I'm going to go to these events and I'm going to attend them a lot often. And people actually start to make public health kind of decisions about their life and adopt more biking, adopt more walking, public transit use, which is one of the reasons why Metro was so keen to start putting resources to it. They saw this as a way to sort of create more adoption of public transit as well in our region. And as you can see from the ethnic breakdown, this ethnic breakdown really much reflects our county's general ethnic breakdown. And so we like to think about that as, you know, our events really reflect our area, our people, the residents of our cities, of our region. You know, LA really comes out. And our event travels all over our region. Here's some of the neighborhoods we've touched over the last 10 years. From Boyle Heights, Wilmington, South Central, Los Angeles, Little Tokyo, you know, Watts, Historic Core, Pasadena, Pomona. The idea of connecting neighborhoods and making sure that you're creating new linkages. It is part of, you know, what we believe is a successful program around these events. Sorry. This particular route has a special place for me. South LA is the neighborhood I grew up in. And I think it also sort of illustrates, you know, some of the special sauce. Our downtown event, that's like, you know, where tourists already go. Downtown LA is already on the map in a lot of ways. South LA and South Central LA, neighborhoods like this, you know, these are neighborhoods that don't typically have a lot of park space, aren't necessarily your initial tourist destinations, but and also residents don't have necessarily a lot of cultural arts programming that naturally happens because there's not already big institutions that are doing it or whatnot. These events mean a lot more to those neighborhoods because they provide a resource that isn't already there. And so it's really important when you site and place these events, we think, to ensure that you're not just putting them in what we, you know, like we think well-off neighborhoods or typical tourist destinations, but you're creating a tourist destination, you're creating an opportunity. And so sharing that opportunity is really important and ensuring constituents across your region get access to it at some point. So that's why we move it around and rotate it from, you know, consistently. And the impacts of these events are very varied, from air quality to public health to local business, economics, local active transportation. There's a lot of different ways these events are successful in pushing and supporting really positive changes in a region. The free, accessible, fun for everyone, inclusive. As I mentioned, about 50,000 people per event attend our event here in Los Angeles, and that changes across, you know, it's going to change region to region, of course, but they become large draws, and they can be very successful. The outreach and communication strategy is always really important. Door-to-door outreach is a critical component of our work. We door-to-door knock every door along our routes, ensuring residents know about what's going on, have opportunities to give us feedback, have opportunities to ask for mitigation and support if there's any kind of imposition that's going to impact their business or their life negatively. Multilingual materials, social media is critical. Just being cutting edge with our communications and creating another point of feedback for hearing about how our events are successful and resonating with folks or not. Local regional marketing and PR has always been critical for us. We've done a lot of press. We've done morning news shows, making sure we're communicating about this program as an opportunity. It's just another way of trying to be inclusive about it, and always communicate community presentations and meetings, bringing information about the program to residents directly where they're at, whether it's their neighborhood council meetings or community meetings, whether it's at their school, whether at the local library, ensuring that we're bringing information to folks and they can find it in places that they would go normally. So we're not demanding that they come to us to learn about this great program. And connecting it to the values of our partners. Like I mentioned earlier, Metro uses this to outreach about their programs. AARP thinks about this as part of their livable city strategy and how this is these kind of programs help to improve life and ability for people to age in place. Blue LA is an electric vehicle car charging program that activates at our events, educating folks about how to access a local car share program that they run, as well as educating about electric vehicles. this is an opportunity to on-ramp and educate and engage people in ways that might improve their life, and benefit for the long term. And that's really important to us. Again, more education. Granted, this is one of our hubs with all the programming activations. And I want to run over too much time. I think I got like 1 more minute. Again, mitigation is incredibly important. And this is mandatory dismounts are places where we ensure folks get off the bikes along the ways and create safer spaces for pedestrians and runners. It's as important to manage, still important to manage speed, even when it's just bicycles. And pedicabs, and not just use the pedicabs to transport people at our event, but also this is a mitigation cab that we gave to a wedding happening on a route. And we said, hey, you guys are going to have a wedding. Want to make sure it doesn't get disrupted. We'll provide some pedicabs and help transport your people to their parking lot and make sure you have a beautiful wedding day. And they appreciated it. That venue we work with often, providing those kind of mitigations to venues and spaces and businesses on the way, helps this program serve everybody. And so we do that, and we put that in our money in our budget. Supporting small businesses is critical with this event. That's why we look for neighborhoods with small businesses, like I mentioned before. They're the lifeblood of neighborhoods, of communities. They lift up culture, and they're incredibly important. I'm gonna jump ahead because I don't want to cut too much into next time. But these other routes, there's some other examples of key routes. Route selection is always about identifying the kinds of neighborhoods and narratives and residents who really need these kind of events. Open streets, we think successful open streets really reflect your city, who your community is. And so what open streets means for you, Broward, will be a little different than what it means exactly for LA or what it means for Minneapolis. But that's kind of the magic of it, because that this is a program that will speak to your residents, because it is for your residents, it's of your residents. I think that's what makes a successful open streets program. And yeah, here's some quotes from people who think we're cool, and our contact information. But again, happy to answer any questions coming up. I want to pass it over to Nick at R Streets, Minneapolis, so he could talk. His presentation, I loved it because he has a little more nuts and bolts than I did. I wanted to really sort of ensure you got the feeling about what these things mean. Nick.
Awesome, thanks, Tafari. That was great. So like Tafari said, I'm Nick. I'm with R Streets Minneapolis in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and hopefully my presentation will be a bit of a compliment in terms of, like Tafari said, the nuts and bolts here. So let me get my presentation rolling. Is everyone able to see this? Cool. So I'm with, like I said, Nick with R Streets Minneapolis. We are the organization that runs Open Streets Minneapolis. Confusing two names there. I'm just going to stick talking with Open Streets, the program here. We're in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's cold up here most of the year, and we're, just for scale, about 1/10 the size in area and population to Los Angeles. So a different bit of a scale here, but a lot of the same lessons that Tafari was talking about apply here. So what I want to do today is talk about how our program got off the ground from the beginning, and also some of the challenges that we faced that we think, and lessons we learned that we think can be helpful to folks launching a new program. So that's kind of the framing that I'm coming at here. If anyone has any questions about this that we don't get to afterwards, feel free to email me. My email is there. So all Open Streets programs across the country look a little bit different. And I believe, as Tafari said, that they should reflect the city and the communities and the corridors that they are in. And so success is going to look different. Definitions are going to look different. So I just want to run through an overview of what we define Open Streets, how we define Open Streets in Minneapolis. So Open Streets Minneapolis here, it's a program. We temporarily close major thoroughfares to car traffic and open them up to people biking, walking, rolling, and connecting with neighbors and local businesses. These are free, family friendly events. They help us experience streets as public spaces that put people first, where communities thrive and spark transformative change. And this is really key to us because in our minds, Open Streets are more than just a street festival. They reach farther into community. They have more durable changes. They spark conversations across community connections that can have, like I said, more durable changes. I'll repeat myself there. As a program, we have 5 main goals that really drive what makes sense for us in our community. And those are here. So those are grow community connection, civic pride, and community engagement, celebrate the diversity of our city, to inspire healthy living, to stimulate local businesses, and of course, to promote active transportation like biking, walking, and et cetera. Let's see here. So a little bit about how we structure our program. So like I said, Open Streets Minneapolis is a program, and there are two main organizations that present this program. One is the City of Minneapolis, so our local government here. This is an org structure of how the program works. So the City of Minneapolis is the presenting organization. They weren't always a presenting organization. I'll get to that in a minute. But what they do today, and have done for a number of years, is they pay for the operational cost of the event. They provide it in kind. So those are things like the cost of closing roads, the cost of traffic control, the police that the city requires us to have, the cost of permitting, and et cetera. These elements being provided by the city are absolutely essential to the success of this program. I don't think this program would be alive today if we didn't have that support from the City of Minneapolis. And it took us some time to prove to them the value that this program has to the community for them to provide that. On the other side of the org chart here, you have Our Streets Minneapolis. So Our Streets, I think I skipped this part, I didn't define this. So Our Streets, we are a small local nonprofit. We work on bicycle and pedestrian advocacy. And Open Streets, confusingly similar names, I know. Open Streets is, we believe, one of the most eloquent and effective tools that we have to really push our vision for streets that put people first and authentically reflect the community and the vibrancy of the specific corridors and areas of our city. So what do we do as the hosts? We call it the hosts. You can also think of us as the organizer. We do the event production. That includes selecting the routes, doing all of the community engagement required to deliver the program, all of the event organization, signing people up, locating spots, operational oversight, and all that kind of stuff. Bottom of this org chart sort of gives an overview of what the smaller pieces of that are. It includes working with all of the community partners along all of the routes. So local businesses, community organizations, community leaders, faith groups, everyone who is going to be impacted by the event should it come to their corridor. We organize the volunteers, we get the sponsorship, and then this final photograph here, which is a picture of a band playing at one of our events, sort of symbolizes we're responsible for organizing all the stuff that you see on the event day of. All right, so I want to talk about how this program came to be in Minneapolis. It was not an overnight success. This took a lot of hard work. I know Minneapolis has a perception around the country as being a bike-friendly community, which we are, but we are also a car-heavy community. We're a small Midwest city. Many of our streets look like the photographs you see here, big two-lane, both direction streets, maybe no bicycle infrastructure on them, not particularly comfortable to bike and walk down. And so open streets, I don't want anyone to have the idea that open streets was like an easy thing to happen in Minneapolis. In fact, just the opposite. We had to fight long and hard to be able to prove the efficacy of this program, although that came pretty quickly. So our first event was in 2011. It was a 2-mile route on a 4-lane road. You can see pictures of that event down below here. It was originally developed, organized, and run day of by volunteers only. So the organization didn't have any staff at that time. We had one presenting sponsor. Most of it was paid for by the local businesses and organizations along the route that were really, they really saw the vision and were excited about this concept of an open streets on their particular route. We did not have any formal city support at that time. So we had to go to the city and fill out paperwork and get the permits and pay the money just like anybody else would having any other event. The very first event, we had an attendance of 5,000 people, and we considered this an experiment that was a success. So one thing I also want to say here that's really important is success can be defined in different ways, especially in different corridors, even in the same city. So I'm going to have some photographs later. I know Tafari had some photographs where you see seas of people, tons of folks, and it looks amazing. And there's 50,000 to 100,000 people in LA. Our biggest event gets to about 50,000 people, but not all of them look like that. Especially the first time around, they don't look like that. They don't feel like that. And I think how you determine success really comes down to the goals of your program, of your specific community and your corridor. And that's going to look different everywhere, excuse me. For us, it was definitely a success that first time around, and we used that momentum to build upon this and grow the program. So from 2012 to 2014, we felt like we had a proven concept, and we were able to go to new parts of the city and say, do y'all want to have an open streets here? We worked with community members, we worked with faith leaders, we worked with business organizations and neighborhood organizations to figure out who was interested in hosting a open streets, where they would be most effective in our communities and where we think we would have the greatest impact. Each route was another experiment. Every time we went to a new place, we weren't exactly sure how it was going to phase out. I mean, we have a specific strategic approach. So, we weren't flying blind here, but we really didn't know until we tried it out and see what happened. And sometimes we were very surprised the amount of people that came out on a very first route. And that was a pleasant surprise, but it wasn't always the case. On the right-hand side here, you can see two photographs of two very first time on these routes. So first time an event was held on those routes that you see there in 2012. So you kind of get a feeling of what they're like the first time around. Like I said, not always packed people everywhere. And I really want to say that is not necessarily a failure. For us, we had other goals that we wanted to reach other than just having tons of people. Attendance is one metric. It's a helpful one, but especially early on, it doesn't have to be your only one. So success really did look different for us on different routes. Some persistent challenges that we faced from the very first route all the way through today when we're coming up with new routes are pretty similar. So those are funding, of course. Like I said earlier, having the city of Minneapolis pay for the operational costs of the event is really the only reason this program has been as successful as it has been. Most of our funding is people who sign up for a spot on the street to participate. So simple businesses coming out to participate. So it's mostly small businesses. Talk about a sponsorship in a little bit here. Business hesitancy. Many businesses are totally inspired by the idea of open streets. They want to see it happen. They're excited about it, but there are a significant amount who aren't convinced, and that's fair enough. They've never seen it before. They've never experienced it before, perhaps, especially coming to a new part of the city. People are rightfully hesitant when someone comes in and they say, hey, we got this idea. How do you want to make it work for you? And we really address that by having long, deep conversations with business leaders, with community leaders. We go door to door to every single business on every proposed route. We have community forums that we talk to folks with, and it takes convincing. This is not a thing that everyone totally gets and is on board with out of the gate, so it takes some convincing. There are some also other persistent challenges. I don't have time to get in here today, but those are things like traffic and parking concerns, safety concerns regarding cars getting on the routes, perhaps. And then there's, of course, general skepticism of the program. And I'm here to say that every one of these things, as soon as people experience it firsthand, the vast majority of people change their mind about it. So in Minneapolis, I'd say 75% of folks are supportive of an open streets that's never been on the route before. 25% are like, I don't really know if I'm interested in this. And a vast majority of that 25% after it has come through their corridor are convinced of its efficacy. Another thing I want to say is we've had 53 events and about 500,000 people come to all of them. To my knowledge, we have never had a person get injured or hurt by a car on a route. So just to add that anecdote. So a little bit about the history as we evolved over time. Like I said, we started in 2011 with one event every year. We added on more events. This graph here shows our total attendance is the blue line over time, and then the number of events is the orange bar below. Most of our events are repeat events. We come back to the same place year after year and build on that, but we have a specific set of resources that we set aside to do more experimental routes and try new places. So we have, like I said, 7 or 8 routes every year. That depends on the amount of resources and logistics of each individual year. But we have tried 16 different routes through the city and tweak certain ones that come back over time. And as you can see, this really took off. We were able to show in a short period of time, a handful of years that people are interested in this, people are excited about this in all areas of the city, in different parts of the city, different cultures of the city. People were excited about open streets and they really wanted to participate. And it got to the point where we had more requests, more interest in having an open streets than we were able to provide, which is the case to this day. Attendance takes time to build is another thing that I like to say to folks who are thinking about coming up with an open streets route. On the left and on the right, this is the same location, same photograph, roughly. It's not exactly the same framing, but it is the same location on the same street at the same event. Just one was in 2011, the very first time we had it on that route, and one was in 2017. So years later, we were able to build this route from 5,000 people on the first time we did it rather, to 45,000 people, and it's even bigger today. So one of the keys to success for us, might not necessarily be the case for everywhere, is to come back to routes that were promising and have them grow over time. Maybe those businesses that were a little hesitant to come up with extra staff on that first time, now they know it's going to be their best day of the year if they staff up on year 2 or year 3. And so we try to build off that success over time. And another takeaway piece here is that success, like I've said probably too many times now already, we define it differently in terms of number of people per event. So I know Tafari touched on this, and I'm not going to get into it in a ton of detail here, but the selection of routes is absolutely essential to the success of the program and of each individual route. We have a list of characteristics, they're not listed here, they're too long to read right now, that define kind of what our vision is for an open streets route. They include things like ideally over 2 miles in length. Typically ours are between 3 and 5 miles long, and they have specific ideas about connecting different parts of our city, make sure they're equitably distributed across our city in different areas of our city, especially parts of our city that don't have these kinds of events often, where there isn't that investment historically. And so we're trying to use our public funds here to help spur that, that investment. So where was I? Sorry, I got myself lost here. Route selection. Every year we work with our communities to come up with 8 event routes. And I said earlier, we have repeat routes, but every single year we revisit where's our money, where's our resources going to be the most effective, and where do we believe our vision is going to be the best realized among the many different places that we could have routes. And so every year we take public input from, well, the public. Anyone can submit a route idea. Us as the organizers, we review those, we engage with local stakeholders around those potential routes. We go door to door, talk to every business, every organization, talk to residents, go to community meetings, host community meetings, really explore what the appetite, capacity, and interest is for the specific route. What's it going to look like? What would it take to be successful? Do we have those things right now? Is this an appropriate use of this? Are people interested in this? We also evaluate the route feasibility. That's things like logistics, scheduling, the budget, of course, and the says here community impact, but also I want to add permits. Is the permitting situation going to play out for us? And then every year in February, March, we make an announcement. We get the events formally approved by our city council, because I said earlier it is a city of Minneapolis sponsored event. So enjoy certain privileges as a official city event. So the city council actually approves these routes. And I know Tara talked about this too. In Minneapolis, we also had to create new processes to do open streets. Originally out of the gate, the city did not have the permitting infrastructure and like landscape where open streets was the thing that even fit in there. You know, there were block parties, there were marathons, but open streets, the unique combination of the length of the route, the amount of street that had to be closed, all the businesses, all the food permits, all the health permits, all the fire permits, that was just on a level that the city had not seen before. And so we experienced a lot of hesitation from the city permitting departments about whether or not this could even, be done, and had to push hard in those early days and eventually work with the city to create new processes that makes this work better for everyone. And fast forward to today, city permit department runs a little bit smoother as a result of this. They have a higher capacity of big events like this. And this is one of the city's favorite things. Council members and the mayor, they're at all the events. They love talking about it. The whole city is very proud of what this has become, but it took a lot of nitty-gritty work over a long period of time to make that the case. A little bit about sponsors and programmers. So sponsorship here are people that, give us money. As I said earlier, it's presented by Our Streets Minneapolis and the city of Minneapolis. These were our sponsors for this year. There is Alina Health and Aetna. That's the biggest sponsor that we have. That is a healthcare and health insurance provider network. Everyone else listed here, with the exception of Lyft, I guess, is a local business, and most of them small local businesses with one location. I want to highlight 36 Lynn Refuel Station. I don't know if folks can see my cursor. I don't think so, but they're listed there. 36 Lynn Refuel Station. They are a gas station on our most popular routes. And, you'd think gas station and cars would be, antithetical to the concept of closing the street to cars, but that's not the case. This is a small community-owned gas station, and the owner really believes in building community in a meaningful and impactful way, and that cars are not the only way to do that. And he knows his clientele base lives in the community, they'll live in the neighborhood, and open streets means a lot to them. And so that's a cool partnership that we have to really bridge some of those, what would appear to be, illogical gaps in partnerships. Programming here, I'm defining as anything that's out on the street that we're having in terms of entertainment, bands, music, and programming looks very different at different open streets and is successful in different open streets at different programs in different places and different communities, right? So I encourage folks to invite and incentivize programming that is appropriate for your goals and your vision. I said earlier, Open Streets is not simply a street fair. That being said, parts of Minneapolis Open Streets specifically, we have strategically decided the quote unquote street fair feel is something that we're okay with in certain sections. So not dissimilar to LA, we have concentrated nodes of programming where we have things like, and this is the most ridiculous example here I want to highlight. There's a wrestling ring. I don't know if people can really see in terms of how that photograph is shown up, but we actually had professional wrestlers, like the jokey campy kind of wrestling come out, and seems kind of a weird thing to have at Open Streets at first. This is totally atypical for us. But after conversations with the businesses in the area, the community in the area, they were like, this would be a cool thing. People would like to come out and see. And so we gave it a shot and it was massively popular. If you go a few blocks south on this route of where you see this photograph here, there is intentionally no program. So spaces where there are empty streets where people can bike and walk and skateboard, where you see that more kind of typical open streets that's more health oriented. And so we really aimed to have a balance of areas with kind of concentrated programming where people want it, and then spaces where people can bike and walk and roll and kind of do their own thing. There's a lot of organic stuff that happens at Open Streets as well. So the takeaway message here is that think intentionally about what kind of programming works best for your vision and your goals. And it's going to look different in different places, and it's going to look different in different parts of individual routes even. So a little bit about the impact, got a few minutes left here. Businesses love open streets. I said earlier that there is always some business hesitancy. That's normal, that's totally understandable. But I also stand by the next thing I said, which is after it's come through, at least 1 year, businesses are like, oh, I get this. This can be one of the best days of the year for us. We very intentionally have designed our fee structure to subsidize local business participation. We've gotten the city to waive health permitting fees for local businesses. That's part of the in-kind contribution that they provide. So we try to minimize the barriers as much as possible for local businesses that are on the route. They get prioritized in all of our planning and all of our processes here. So a little bit of numbers here of the 215 participating businesses that completed our survey. This is from 2018. The 2019 numbers are a little bit different. They are not lower, they are just not one-to-one. So this is why we're doing 2018 numbers here. 82% rated their overall experience as excellent or good. 85% said more for visibility and awareness for their organization. This is just a smash hit for businesses up and down each route. We've had a number of grand openings that were specifically scheduled around open streets, and many businesses, especially on a more popular route, say this is the best day of the year. They staff up for it, they get extra product for it, and they plan for open streets and hope for good weather every single year. So impact beyond businesses, the impact in terms of real community change to our streets. So open streets is really a unique opportunity to inspire real change and to have really impactful conversations about how we can make our streets more livable in a way that works for everyone and really reflects authentically the communities that they are in. A couple of examples of this are we've seen new improved bicycle infrastructure, new improved pedestrian infrastructure, including bump outs and crosswalks. We've had paint the pavement crosswalk installations, which is where people artistically paint crosswalks to help highlight pedestrian visibility. Two examples of photographs below here. On the left is someone showing a pop-up protected bikeway where we demonstrate what a protected bikeway would be like on some of these routes and really talk to people about what more robust bicycle infrastructure can look like. And on the right, this was a very cool event. We had a whole event highlighting what a linear park could look like in a specific residential section where the city had proposed converting a street into a residential park. That proposal is in a complex place right now in terms of what happened, but we were able to, you can see here, bring sod out and actually sod the street and kind of let people see what would this be like, because you don't know until you see it yourself. Other impacts beyond businesses and changes to the street are just growing community connections and civic pride, which is one of the hugest pieces of open streets. We want open streets to be vibrant cultural spaces with arts programming, places where you see, again, the communities and the corridors that we're in meaningfully and authentically reflected. And I think running short on time here, so I'm just gonna go briefly here. Open streets went from an obscure idea championed by a small group of dedicated volunteers to one of the largest signature cultural events in the city. where, as you can see up here, 70% of attendees live within 3 miles of each route. So it really does reflect the community. And I don't have time in this presentation to talk about it, but we go to great lengths to power share with community members and organizations to say, what does this section of the event look like to you? What do you want it to be? And support them through those kinds of efforts. Final slide here. So some parting thoughts. Just some things that we've learned that I think may be helpful, helpful to new routes is participating in this worldwide movement will require some bravery and ambition at first. These are things that don't always come super easy, even in places like Minneapolis, where we're a bike-friendly city. Takes a lot of work, have to create new processes, have to create new structures, have to have those conversations and convince people. There is no shortcut. Also, strongly encourage working collaborating with community to create shared goals and visions that's authentic for your specific program. Definitely want to ensure stakeholders are meaningfully involved from ideation to implementation, through the whole process. Always know there will be skeptics, and part of, I view, your job as organizers will be to convince them. You can show them successful programs like LA and Minneapolis, for example. Be bold with route selection. Short open streets don't feel like open streets. We've tried to do kind of a bit shorter routes, and it's not worth the time. They need to be bold. They need to be inspirational to really hit people on that emotional level of what these can really do. And then finally, large scale attendance, which is, I want to stress, only one potential key to success, but is a key to success, may take a few years, and it's not going to happen overnight. So with that, that ends my formal presentation here, and I will hand it back to Stephanie from here.
Thank you so much, Nick. I think we will open up to final remarks. So Tafara and Nick, if you wanna maybe say something to our group of attendees, and then we will start sharing the screen for 1 Mentimeter question, and then open it up to the audience for questions.
Just a closing comment. I mean, I think Nick, I love that these programs always resonate so much across, even though, it looks slightly different, but a lot of the values are the same. Just a couple of parting shots. Festival versus a bikeway. Like, we found it really important to find balance between that, and we create those hubs and we create those dismount zones to kind of ensure that pedestrians and other users can, folks in wheelchairs, like other users, can feel welcome. We also found, you're creating a cultural space in and of itself too. And we noticed that, like, our more athletic kind of spandex riders, we like to jokingly call them, like they'll want to speed through these routes, and so we've had to take some stance around, these spaces being for everyone, and encouraging slow down messaging and language and signage around slowing people down, and all, as many communication tools as we can to, create an inclusive space around how people are using the space. And so I just want to highlight that there is some thought there and some intentionality about that. And it might look different based on what you want the event to look like. You may want it to be more of a bikeway, more of a traditional, just straight open street. But we don't shy away from the dynamic of it being kind of festival-like, because we really feel that there's also mental health benefits to these events, not just physical health, the mental health benefits that come from connection, culture, that kind of more leans itself to that festival space in that way. And we really want to lean into that as well. Permanent changes. I mean, post-pandemic, the last thing I'll just say, and we had our 2 events this year post-pandemic. Turnout was great and up. Like, we did one of the events was in one of our smaller communities in Wilmington. And that event had to be at least plus 50% attendance to our last time we were there post-pandemic. So there's still a great appetite for that kinds of activities, if not more so, I think, coming out of a long period of, solitary living isolation for folks coming out of this pandemic. So I'll leave it at that so we can get some questions in.
Thank you so much, Safarai. So just so we want to invite everyone to scan the QR code that you can see in the screen, or if you don't have a smartphone close to you, you can just go to the website www.menti.com and then enter the code 8197-1305 in order to participate in a quick question, and I will show you what's the question right now. So the question, and you can also use the Q&A chat to reply. Please name cities, communities in Broward where a Ciclovia event will have a greater impact. And of course, this is to open up, the opportunity for cities in Broward to, why not, host a future Ciclovia.
And Stephanie, while we're getting answers to that one, can I respond to this question in the Q&A?
Yes.
For us, we have state and county roads through our city. What's the key to get buy-in from governments other than your own local levels to close the streets even for a while? In LA and Los Angeles, yeah, we have a lot of those crossover jurisdictions. And what we've done is we often do outreach to our state level officials, even our federal level officials, invite them to the events, ensure if they want some space to engage with constituents, make sure that they know they have opportunity. We make them we try to make them partners in it as well. That kind of helps us deal with some of those permissions and conversations with our statewide transportation, Caltrans, and those kinds of partners. Occasionally it gets a little sticky, but essentially, because we partner with our city, we partner with the governments around us. Often that helps us have these conversations with other government departments, officials, entities.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I would say we have a similar experience in Minneapolis. Obviously, the interface between municipalities and county and state governments and how they work with their streets and who has permission for what is different in different places. But one thing that we find is we also have events that are on county roads, and we need to work with county officials in the same way that we work with city officials. And I like what Tafari said, make them partners in the process. A lot of times they're interested in re-envisioning their county streets that come through the city. They might have a rebuild plan going on, a restriping opportunity, or something's coming up where they're thinking about what is the city or what is the street going to look like? What's this corridor going to look like? And we are able to say, well, we have an awesome opportunity to close it for a minute, get as many people who actually live in the area as possible, who use and travel up and down this corridor, to come out and have those conversations that you'd like to have. And then the reality is sometimes it does take conversations at the level of elected officials, where maybe staffing isn't as receptive to it because they don't have the resources. And a lot of times, as I talked about earlier, the permitting infrastructure might actually be there to have something like an open streets program. So.
Hey, and Tafari and Nick, thank you for answering that question. I just wanted to mention that did come from one of our MPO board members representing the city of Coconut Creek. And I was hoping to see Commissioner Welch here, Coconut Creek, on that list of cities that'd be great for Ciclovia events. I think we have some of our other elected officials, some of our other board members in attendance today, so we appreciate your participation and hope to be able to talk more with you about your interest level in this. We got another question, and maybe this goes a bit to Stephanie and the team to answer about what goals do we have for a Broward Ciclovia?
Okay, well, that's a great question, Ryan. Well, basically, what we do want to do is work with the different, municipalities in Broward County to bring an event together, representing not just, one municipality, but Broward. And I think the main goal of working together for a Broward Ciclovia is to, of course, bring better streets for our communities, and somehow bring the concept of public spaces to the streets. Streets are not just for driving, streets are for celebrating. So the idea is to also bring the concept of safety. So how can we make our streets safer? So showcasing our streets for people will help us identify how we can make the streets safer for our community. And of course, I mentioned before, celebrating the streets. So how we celebrate the streets? We think about our streets as just the lanes, right? But what about the businesses that are along those streets? How we communicate, how we interact with the elements of the street, and how we try to bring the streets to that space of, this is a public space and this is for our community. So there are different elements. That we can highlight, but I think one is, working with the community, and other one is, of course, safety. But I think the most important here is how Broward County envision these type of events for their people. How we put people first in our streets. So we have to start somewhere, and the NPO is already, we have a Computer Streets Initiative program, and that's why one of our priorities is how we connect with the community in order to bring this concept of computer streets in our communities, and how we work towards designing better streets. So it is like a bridge between the planning, the planning side of it, and how we work with our communities to get this or to make this happen. So it is, a bridge between the community and the planning side of computer streets.
And Stephanie, if I could maybe have Tafarai and Nick jump into the next question from Ralph, because it's kind of similar to what you were just talking about, Stephanie, about beginning collaboration between smaller cities and towns. I'm not sure if you're Los Angeles or Minneapolis examples, if you've had to deal with different jurisdictions. It's a little different from our Commissioner Welch's question about roadway jurisdictions, but do you have some perspectives on that?
Yeah, I went first last time. Nick, you want to go first, or you want to?
No, you got it first. I think you probably have more examples of this than I do, so go for it.
So we've done across our LA County, which is a really large county, we've done a number of cross-jurisdictional events. My team likes to keep it simple with those, so that once we did one, we had like 5 or 6 different jurisdictions, and my team nearly lost all their hair. But because the dynamics of dealing with different permitting processes and different rules can get kind of heady. I think one success is on that. We really, the grassroots nature of these kinds of programs help, right? And when you're talking to residents, these lines don't necessarily really exist for them, like you have experience and friends and family across these jurisdictions often. And those conversations can be helpful in helping this event like this be successful and trickle up. And so we'll engage with community organizations that cross over these jurisdictions, and they'll help us have conversations with jurisdictions that might be a little bit more sticky or a little more difficult. We also, emphasize the nature of the event really serving residents at that level. And that often can get those constituents or those jurisdictions a little bit more open-minded about, the work it will take to make these things happen. Oftentimes those jurisdictional lines, there's some reinforcement of those boundaries because of politics and stuff. But these events can really cut through that because they're kind of like just a benefit for all. And really just serving, the public. And so I think that by nature, I think they kind of help. But, again, those relationships can also be helpful. And because of the grassroots nature, I really encourage building with the organizations, building with the constituents too, as you're building the program out, and having them help have those conversations with those jurisdictional leaders.
Yeah, I would echo everything you just said. In our limited experience with this, we've done a couple of that. And I would add one other possible creative solution, and that is when permitting, a lot of times in our experience, it's been permitting issues. Like you'll want to go through one city and get to the next city, and all of a sudden, well, they don't do these kind of permits or that kind of thing. You can come up with some creative solutions. Maybe you don't have like food or something in one section of the route. You just have it in another section route, a different place. Maybe the traffic closure looks a little bit different. The bottom line is that it's going to be sticky. It's going to be challenging. A lot of times getting, especially if you can, specifically in our experience, elected officials into the room with one another, that can be a way to obviously motivate staff and get things done that way. Sometimes you got to get a little bit political with it, to just be honest with people, to make it happen.
And I love that example too. Sometimes we've had it where one jurisdiction partnered with another to provide some services across boundaries because the one jurisdiction had the capacity to do the services at a higher level than the smaller one. And so some of that partnership kind of building came out of the relationship of designing the program. And it can be, this could be great benefit for those jurisdictions in the future, having better relationships.
Yeah, no one wants to be the jurisdiction where the awesome event comes up and just randomly ends and doesn't get to the business node that's just a few blocks down, and people are like, what's going on here? So there's always that incentive that you keep in your pocket to hopefully convince people. But I don't think there's a shortcut to any of this. I think it's all just long, hard organizing work.
Great. Thank you so much for your feedback. And I just want to answer the last question. What time frame of the year is a Broward event being planned? This is a great question, and I want to answer this question with this slide. So we are right now working on the creation of a planning committee, because as following your recommendation, we want to start working with the stakeholders since the beginning. We want to get everyone involved. So we are working on this planning committee, and soon you will receive an invitation to select what day exactly we can meet in November, December, and January, because we want to start working on this. And about time frame exactly, well, it depends on who's going to be partnering with the NPO and who's going to be hosting the first Ciclovia of 2022. And who knows, the upcoming Ciclovias, you know, there is time to work on that. But if you are interested in learning more about this effort, please send me an email and you will be informed about the upcoming planning committee meeting. And thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I think this is an exciting topic. And of course, everyone wants to have the same as Minneapolis and LA here in Broward. You know, we want to bring our community together and we want to be able to enjoy our streets. So how can we do it? Well, open streets is an answer. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.